we start a discussion on an issue making headlines. The mysterious disappearance of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un sparked a flurry of speculation, ranging from a simple isolation to avoid catching the coronavirus, to a heart surgery gone wrong and even an overthrow of his regime. However, the young leader reappeared on state media late last week at a fertilizer factory of all places, quelling those rumours. But this hasn't put an end to those questions as to why he was gone for 20 days or what comes next for the regime, especially as soon after he reappeared, North Korean soldiers fired shots across the border to South Korea. To discuss the issue, we have joining us today John Nilsson-Wright, Senior Lecturer at the University of Cambridge, and Jenny Town, Fellow at the Stimson Centre and the Deputy Director of 38 North, a website providing technical and policy analysis on North Korea. My first question to you, Dr. Nilsson-Wright. On Sunday morning, North Korea fired multiple gunshots across the border at a South Korean guard post. The South's Joint Chiefs of Staff, as well as US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, says it seems to have been by accident. Do you agree with this? And if it was a calculated move, what kind of message do you think that North Korea was trying to send?
I think the evidence at the moment suggests that this is more likely to have been an accident than intentional. If it had been intentional, I suppose it's reasonable to speculate that this is an opportunity for Kim Jong-un to say to the outside world, I'm back. The assumption that I was ailing or weak is clearly being challenged. Also, a warning not to take advantage of any sign of perceived political weakness in North Korea. And similarly, internally, firing shots may be an effort to demonstrate that Kim Jong-un is in charge of the military and therefore he's not going anywhere and is able to assert his authority. But think back 10 years ago when in 2010 we had much bigger military engagement between the two Koreas, the sinking of the Cheonan, the frigate, in the spring of 2010, and then the firing of shells across the northern limit line that killed 4 South Koreans, 2 soldiers and 2 civilian personnel. This exchange, this firing of 4 artillery shots to South Korea through the DMZ is much, much more minor. And I think it's more likely to assume that this is an accident rather than something intentional on the part of the leadership.
Well, Ms. Town, it seems that Kim Jong-un is back. He appeared at a fertilizer factory in a city north of Pyongyang. And during this time, during the time that he was absent, Seoul has been denying that he was sick. But US officials seemed less certain of his status. Why do you think there were such conflicting views?
Well, there's a lot we don't know about that period. And certainly this all started with a rumor that came out of Daily NK. That seemed to escalate pretty quickly, and it didn't help that there was constant media scrutiny, a lot of echo chamber going on. But there were U.S. officials, unnamed officials, who were basically backing every version of the story. And so it did create a lot of confusion and a lot of concern, because obviously the stakes are very high if something does happen to Kim Jong-un. So, going forward, I think it's a lesson for us all of, sources do matter. But there's a lot that we don't know, and there's a lot that we, especially in the public, that we're not going to get in real time. And there's a bit of caution here to sometimes we just do have to wait and see what happens and where that story really lies.
Well, just, Ms. Tan, how guarded is the health status of Kim Jong-un? And if he was actually ill, then how would this be confirmed?
Well, generally, the health of Kim Jong-un, if something does happen to him where he's sick or has surgery, it's not something that's promoted, that's told by the media in real time. There might be hints at it, such as discussions in the state media about exhaustion or overworking himself. And there may still be those messages in the coming days that would give us some clues as to if there was something, in his physical condition that caused his absence over the last 2 weeks. But sometimes too, he's only been gone a couple of weeks. He did miss one major event. But if it hadn't been for that rumor, it wouldn't be that uncharacteristic for him to be gone for this period of time. So sometimes, it's just too easy to jump on that speculation trail of why isn't he in public when sometimes he's just not in public and he may be doing other things that they're not televising.
I see. Well, the secrecy of the regime does make these rumors all the more juicier, I suppose. Well, Dr. Nilsson-Wright, during Kim Jong-un's absence from the public eye, his sister Kim Yo-jong was in the limelight during that time, and some even suggested that she would eventually take control of the regime. We've certainly seen her status grow in recent years as one of her brother's most trusted aides to one of the top officials in the North Korean leadership. Just how influential is the younger Kim, and do you think she will continue to amass power, even to the extent of one day becoming North Korea's leader?
Well, there's no doubt that proximity to power, her closeness to her brother, is a sign that she's influential. But to take the next leap and assume that she is therefore destined to take over from him, I think is premature at this stage. Her family ties in this dynastic system where your DNA is perhaps your clearest passport to success in terms of succession is clearly an advantage for her. We know that she, in April, was reappointed as an alternate member to the Politburo, very important indicator of some degree of political influence. We know that the symbolic importance of placing her front and center close to the leadership in a number of photo shoots has been further indication, if you like, to some observers that she's growing in stature. And there have even been some speculation, a little bit like the rumors about the health of her brother, in this case fueled by Japanese media speculation, that as late as last year she was being groomed for the succession. But again, we should take that with a large grain of salt. Her gender may count against her in this very chauvinistic society. And one has to say, with Kim, if you like, back in the political saddle, it's hard to imagine at this stage that she's going to be in a position, given that we know so little about the health of Kim, to move into a position of real authority. So she will continue to remain, I think, influential, particularly given her role in managing propaganda. And we've seen in terms of the body language of people around Kim that she's someone who is treated with respect. And the latest images, the visuals of Kim visiting that fertilizer factory had her sitting right next to her brother, a sign that she is very close to him and politically, symbolically, again, quite influential.
Well, Ms. Town, do you see Kim Yo-jong as the potential successor to Kim Jong-un? And who else do you think may be able to assume the role if Kim Jong-un is sick or unable to control the regime?
Well, I agree with Dr. Nilsson. They really have been building up her profile. And in the past, under Kim Jong-il, you did see other members of the bureaucracy that would rise up, and we would always talk about whether someone was approximate number 2 or number 3 in the regime. These were not family members, but other, trusted inner circle elites. We don't see that anymore. And Kim Jong-un has really, in his vie to consolidate power, has sort of gotten rid of that status. And instead, you always see Kim Yo-jong. You see a lot of propaganda as well, reinstilling the importance of the bloodline. So I think there is the signs there that they have thought about succession, that they are sort of grooming her potentially to be in that role. She has served proxy for him in some major international events, such as the Pyeongchang Olympics, and she's been with him at all of the summits as well. So I don't think there's another member of the family that could really step into that in a sudden way. Whether or not a transition to power to her would be successful is, again, anyone's guess and probably too early to tell.
Well, the recent chain of events really did have us speculating, but it does seem for now that Kim Jong-un is back and is still in charge. And President Trump tweeted that he's glad to see Kim back and well, and according to some media outlets, he hinted that he may actually reach out to him. So, Dr. Nilsson, right, do you think after more than a year of standstill in their nuclear talks, there'll be some kind of progress or exchanges taking place in the near future?
I'm pretty skeptical that we're going to see an immediate breakthrough. Donald Trump, of course, likes to speak ambitiously about what he would like to achieve on the peninsula. But there is, I think, summatory exhaustion. We've had, of course, 3 meetings between Donald Trump and his North Korean counterpart. And Hanoi, February of 2019, represented the kind of the apex of those efforts to bring the two sides together. The deadlock, of course, is now over the question of denuclearization and who's going to blink first. All the expectation in Washington is that the North Koreans have to show some real credibility in terms of offering something that amounts to the beginning of denuclearization. Whereas for the North Koreans, of course, it's sanctions relief that they want more than anything. At the moment, Donald Trump, of course, has his hands full in managing the COVID-19 crisis. And you have to ask the question, what are the incentives for the North Korean leader at this point to make real concessions? After all, he would be better placed, I think, waiting till November, with all the uncertainties surrounding the long-term political survival of Donald Trump. And with time on his side, Kim Jong-un can afford to wait and continue to engage in the sort of low-level provocations that we saw in March with those 5 sets of missile tests, in an effort, I think, again, to force the international community, to force the United States to offer something in the way of sanctions relief. So I would be skeptical of any major breakthrough, but we may see some middle-ranking, low-level talks between the two sides to talk about the possibility of getting those sorts of lower-than-summit-level discussions back on the table again.
Would you agree with this, Ms. Town? Do you think communication is ongoing between the two sides, and do you think the North will keep pressing for some kind of exchange or progress?
Well, I think the mechanism for communication is still there. The incentive for communication, as John alluded to, I think it is questionable. Especially with Pompeo's remarks. Does the U.S. really have something else to offer right now? Is it willing to offer something in advance of an agreement that would change the terms of the negotiation? Because it doesn't seem like the North Koreans are really willing to come back to the table to continue down the same discussion path that we had before. I think you also run into the problem of elections in terms of, why would North Korea negotiate now when there is uncertainty about who will win the elections? What would an agreement pre-elections really mean if Trump doesn't win? At the same time, though, the North Koreans are not very keen on Biden. If Biden does become the actual candidate, the formal candidate, then they may have some incentive to try and create some momentum that may help the image of Trump in the elections, pre-election. So you just don't know. But again, I think the incentives right now for the North Koreans and the trust right now of the North Koreans in Donald Trump's ability to actually enact something before the elections come, I think is still quite low.
Right, well, I'm afraid that's all we have time for today. But it's been a wonderful discussion. Thank you very much, John Nilsson-Wright, Senior Lecturer at the University of Cambridge, and Jenny Town, Fellow at the Stimson Centre and the Deputy Director of 38 North. This is also where we end the show today. Thank you for watching. We'll be back at the same time on Wednesday, Korea time. Have a good one wherever you are. Bye-bye.